Everything changes is one way to sum up Buddhism. It may be harder to accept what follows from that, which is that nothing can be said to exist then, including us. But it is from such an understanding of no self that we learn not to be bothered by anything. Suzuki Roshi also said that why we suffer is because we fear change. We go out of our way to try to ignore it or to have it take place at all. Yet the nature of reality is that it is always changing. It is unavoidable that things change irrespective of whether or not we want them to remain the same. Buddha nature is the one thing that doesn't change, for it is its nature to change. Yet while our lives are always changing, it is in our accepting all the changes that we truly can live. Then we are being right where we are. If we are trying to avoid change, then we are likely to be flying off in thoughts or related emotions instead of standing on the ground of our world. It is only there that our actual situation can be truly handled, whatever it is. Anything we are unable to accept may become something that we will not be able to deal with in our life. A seemingly high percentage of the small things that we can't accept, the stuff that irritates us by getting on our nerves, is directly due to our worrying about ourselves. We may think the way we do, but it doesn't mean that it must make sense. Shakyamuni Buddha said simply that nirvana, the absence of suffering, comes about through our forgetting the self. This is not done when giving credence to whatever thoughts we have. For instance, we tend to want to have the right to choose things, no matter how unimportant they are, starting with our getting things that we want and not getting things that we don't want. The third Chinese ancestor, Sosun, in his Shin Mai, Faith and Mind, the oldest Chan text, said that our troubles would all vanish if we stopped needing to make choices. It is not having preferences per se that is the problem, but our being attached to whether or not we receive what we desire. This is because of our attachment to our small self, the one who desires to have choices, even though Shakyamuni said that there is no such thing as a self. He meant by this the petty self, the self that thinks about the self that wants to have its own way. The opposite of living to fulfill the demands of the small self is accepting whatever happens in our life. Recognizing then that each of us is a world, everything taking place in it becomes our responsibility. When Hakuin Zenji was a young monk, a Japanese monk, he lived by himself in a small temple. One day, a group of villagers came to him with a newborn baby and told him that its mother had said that he was the father. To this extraordinary news, Hakuin simply said, Ahsoka. Translates says sometimes, okay, or all right, and took the baby from them and raised it. Everyone then ostracized him. But when a year or so had passed, the villagers came back. It turned out that the real father had come forward because the couple had decided to marry. Hakuin simply said, Ahsoka, all right, and gave up the child. This is an example of acceptance in Buddhism. What this story provides isn't a suggestion that we need to put up with everything in the world, even things that are bad. That would rather be acquiescence, giving into something because we think we don't have a choice. True acceptance does not imply having to surrender. When the baby was thrust into his world, Hakuin took it, even though he certainly lost all honor and likely his future as a priest in doing so. While had he not taken it, in medieval Japan, a baby might have even been abandoned in the mountains. The reason that Hakuin had taken it was because he accepted his own world. What comes to us is what we have. Life is much simpler when self-interest isn't involved. For when we become open to everything, including changes, life is much simpler when self-interest isn't involved. For when we become open to everything, including changes, whatever they are, they are. The Tathagata, which means another name for Buddha, in the Lotus Sutra, the famous Mahayana Sutra, the Tathagata in the Lotus Sutra, looking out at the people gathered before him as he was about to begin to give a talk, and seeing all Buddhas sitting on their own lotuses in their own land, seeing all Buddhas sitting on their own lotuses in their own pure lands, is representative of each of us living in our own world. This is a picture of our enlightened nature. Thank you. Now we are open to questions. Jane and I both answer questions. So we can move this over. I'll pick up this. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. I'll come closer. My son moves. Okay. Anybody have any comments or questions? Yes, Mike?
Are you saying in a way that we don't make choices, but life requires us to make choices depending on the situation, but we don't become attached to those choices we make, so that we don't, demand that they succeed, or we don't dread they fail, but life will require us to make a choice, but we don't become attached to it? And is that a way of what you were talking about, in the sense that we don't make choices?
No. Well, that. However, what you said is indeed true, Mike. But no, It's more a matter of not caring about choices. Of
It
course,
doesn't,
we must make decisions. We must make choices. We do it all the time. But it's the attachment that's the problem.
that's what I was thinking, was that was you have to make choices in life, but you don't get attached to the result. You just say, okay, I'll do this
Yeah,
and go from there.
yeah, yeah. Whatever you do, whatever is suitable
Okay.
for the situation. You follow the situation. You don't follow your desires so much as you follow what's in your world. You take care of that world, which includes everybody else in that world.
You don't have predetermined decisions when you have a choice. You just follow the situation, do what you can that's best, and then walk away from it. And that's the end of it. You don't dwell on it. You don't regret it, or or anything like that. You just move on.
Yeah, but even that matter, yeah, you just, uh, there's a big difference, a very small, superficial difference between American and Japanese culture. Is in American culture, if you go to someone's house, they ask you what you would like to drink, and then they give you a choice, and then you choose one of them, or any choice you'd like, they will usually satisfy. In Japan, they just serve you something. They may ask you also. It's not quite that formal, but that generally is the way. That they assume that whatever comes is fine. These are things that, of course, that are superficial, but we get upset about very superficial things. You know, people get upset in traffic. They get upset when they think someone disses them. They may or may not have dissed them. We have all kind of things that get us riled up, or that we're disappointed by, or when we get what we desire, then it only lasts a very short time, and then we have the need to desire something else. There's nothing wrong. Nothing. Obviously, desire is a part of being human, but once again, it's always the attachment. It's what your mind is doing to what's happening to your world. So you don't get carried away. And we're not carried away, things become much, much simpler.
Thank you.
Once again, don't forget, it's not a matter of acquiescence. It's a very subtle difference between accepting everything and acquiescence. Because as I didn't make it that clear, but of course, when you're to be accepting of everything means to be open to everything. And it's that openness that is really important. Nothing gets refused.
And that way, you actually don't have any surprises. Life just goes on.
No, in a way, that's kind of true. Yeah, certainly much less surprise. Yeah.
Thank you, Peter.
Because I didn't mention this today, but I've mentioned it recently. For Soto Zen, enlightenment is going beyond form and emptiness. And that means, which means going beyond all distinctions. So not living by distinctions. Because but when you don't live by distinctions, that's the closest that you can come to enlightenment. Or certainly to emptiness as well. So therefore, you should be your relative world and your absolute world. Your relative world, of course, is the world of desires and distinctions. But the absolute world is the world beyond thought. And that world beyond thought is the world of enlightenment. And so we live side by side with the two. our relative world, and our absolute world are no longer differentiated between. So it's not just by following the precepts, it's by how to truly be your life, how to truly make your life, how to make your life the life of everyone else. Thank you, Mike. Yeah.
John.
Yes, John? And then Rachel?
So I think a little explanation is required with regards to, if you would, for me, acceptance does not mean inaction.
No.
By accepting that which comes doesn't mean, though, that we don't act upon things that come our way and just accept whatever comes our way. For instance, take the COVID. You know, you don't just accept that it's COVID and it is what it is, and okay, so it is what it is, so I'm not going to get a vaccine because it is what it is. You take the action of getting the vaccine. And there's a lot of things like that in life where things come your way and you just don't accept the wave of it, but rather you take some action to maybe redirect the wave or whatever may be the situation. You don't just accept whatever comes your way because that's just what it is. I mean, you obviously need to live in the world of form and take some action.
Yes, that's very true. That's very true. And exactly, because actually it's how to really live your life, which is to live your life not passively, but in action. So, but you live your life with clarity when you're not confused by minor details that can hound us.
So it's then the action needs to be guided by
The situation.
the lack of, not being deluded and jealousy and all the things that come to us in the world of delusion, hate and greed and all of that. If we're free of that and we're making decisions based free on that and actions based free on that, then that ties into true acceptance of what's coming our way rather than this delusion of what's really coming our way. Something could be coming our way, and if we're deluded, we can make it out to be much, much more than it is, or much less than it is, or what have you. But if we're not deluded, if we're seeing it in a clean manner, we can then act in a manner that is best for that situation. There's a word for it, and it's escaping me. But yes, am I
Exactly.
on the right track?
No, you express that very, very well. And it's very, very helpful, actually. Yeah, because yes, I didn't include in the idea that it definitely was not passive. It's the opposite of being passive. We are passive when we are giving in to our delusions. We give in to them.
So it's really our constant action in being present and being able to really be in these moments and understand them for what they are, and then act in a proper manner. That's really, and then at that point, accepting the outcome for whatever it may be, then that's what we're really talking about here. Yes?
Yes, it is. Yeah, very good.
Thank you, Peter.
Excellent. Anyone else? Yes, Rachel?
In many fields, but I'm thinking of art, that especially uses imagination, but also medicine. Frequently, it requires tremendous diligence and striving, actual striving and dedication, and also sometimes really excellence and skill. Is it wisdom then? And actually making what you do the practice itself that allows one well, to strive, you know, to work, especially if you were in medicine. I was there briefly, where you deal with many people. Is it the wisdom over time and experience, but actually making what you do, the practice also itself, that can allow someone to pursue, or I shouldn't say pursue, but, you know, to create within what most people think of as goal-oriented situations, but someone can be really inspired and dedicated to create the art or heal.
Yes, most certainly. Shakyamuni
Competitive.
was very dedicated to that, wasn't he? Yeah, from the start for us. But yes, very, very much so. Yeah, yeah. When you are doing something and you're concentrating on something and you're really concentrating on it, you're never really you're never thinking about yourself. There's no space for it, actually. You're just doing what you're doing. And so there can be striving in that, a kind of striving, certainly working hard, you know. And of course, there are times when things don't work out and you have a lot of problems, and you don't get rid of problems. You get rid of the wrong solutions to problems, or inconsequential solutions to problems.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else?
Anyone here too?
What?
Anyone
Here too, of course. No. You have anything? Yeah. Ruben? We have Ruben. We have two more members today.
Virginia.
Ruben, who's
and Reuben.
from Oregon, close to you. What was from Oregon? The person who was just speaking is from Washington.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah,
also
You go ahead. Yep.
there's also a certain freedom in joyfully accepting and dealing with whatever life brings you.
Yes.
So there's a freedom in saying, well, this is what I have now, and I will do this to the best of my ability and be joyful about it, and you know, and respond as skillfully as I can in this moment. Right?
That's right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's not just
It's not hardship, or
Right,
As a
it's
matter of
not-
fact, it's
right.
the attitude of joy is kind of in the background when it's taking place. Yeah.
Mhm.
Very, very true. Jane, you have any comments?
Not really. You've covered them pretty well. So I don't have anything at the moment, nothing further to say than we've already said.
Chris, nothing? Lying down.
I think Joe has.
Oh,
his
Joe?
hand
Oh,
up.
yeah, he does. Joe, please go.
Hello. So what do you think the attitude should be if you try and you don't, you fail?
What?
You try and you fail?
Oh.
Yeah, like let's say you try to follow these precepts and you just can't. Like, what should the attitude be?
Next.
Yeah, I
Next.
like that
Next.
answer. Next.
And next.
Next means, yeah. She doesn't mean next question. She means
I mean, next trial, next challenge.
Yeah.
Next situation.
But I mean, how should one carry itself in how it talks, Because it could be discouraging in the mind. It could be being too hard on oneself. So what should the attitude be in that moment to kind of snap back?
There's a saying, I forget which Zen master said this, that Zen practice is mistake after mistake, making mistake after mistake. And so I think just the idea of separating the world into mistake and non-mistakes is like limiting yourself to begin with. And so it makes you afraid to make a mistake and desirous of making no mistakes. And so that's a sure recipe for making mistakes. And so, because it makes you very limited in how you feel you can act. So the best way is just to go ahead and make the mistakes and learn from them. Don't make a big deal. Just drop the word fail, drop the word mistake. It's just a course of action that led to this consequence, and you don't think it's a good consequence. So then you revise how you look at it and you just change.
Yeah, you just say my bad and go on. A serious my bad, but not a lengthy one.
I think you repair what you need to repair, but you just go on and don't hang on to one thing.
If I could add,
Life will be happy to change for you again.
if I could add into that as well,
Sure.
I love the concept that Jane and you have brought and that we've talked about before with the Japanese concept of wabi-sabi, and how imperfections in what we would otherwise deem, imperfections add to, they don't take away from necessarily. And it's this idea also is the fabric of our lives. Perfection is not what a life is made of. A life is woven of all kinds of imperfections and errors. And when I look back at my life, the points at which I learned the most about myself and I grew the most and I became more human and I got closer to my Buddha nature are when I failed the greatest. And I think that's really important, that our lives at the end are this fabric of not just perfection, but imperfections that make us who we are. And that's extremely important that we, and it's hard in the moment. It's always hard in the moment when we're in the middle of a failure or something horrible has happened to us and it didn't go our way. But, the acceptance of it and knowing that later in our lives, it's going to actually make that fabric stronger. That's really what's important and what we should try and strive to understand, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
My 10 cents worth, in science, they say you learn more from your mistakes than you do from your successes.
Also true.
I think when you have a mistake, John, you sort of like drop all of your extra coverings just for a few moments, even for a short time. And so you're so vulnerable at that point that you touch everything. It's like every part of you feels like it's alive just for a moment, even if it's excruciating alive. It's something wakes up during a failure that doesn't when you have a success. Not always, anyway.
I agree. And oftentimes our successes can lead to things that aren't always the best for us, pride and, lots of things come from successes that aren't necessarily all that wonderful. So we should also keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, pride is the fourth delusion.
Also,
after the first three. So pride is actually when you get deeper, longer into your practice, and things are really starting to really go well in your practice. Then there's a kind of the thing that creeps in is pride, and pride is only about self. Yeah, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
No, go.
Also, I was going to just say to add one thing, as a painter, you try to control everything, exactly the way you would like it to be. And the best paintings I find work when you allow living to have its own say beyond what you're holding the brush does, so that you have what in art is called happy accidents, things that completely looked like they were destroying the picture, and then you suddenly realize, oh my God, that opened up a whole new area of the painting in a way I hadn't thought of. So I think maybe everywhere we have those kind of situations that we normally say failures and push away, but maybe they're happy accidents waiting to be seen.
Yes, Rachel.
I just wanted to say, even in that glorious realm of science, some of the most stupendous discoveries were accidents. Now, the scientist was able to recognize what he found, but Michael Faraday is one example. But I mean, there have been so many where they developed something and dropped it, and then they realized what happened. And you know, the field is littered with that kind of thing happening, just as in art. I mean, but they don't usually bring that up, but it's true. And also the amount of painters and creators and scientists who died in, you know, disrepute. Their work was mocked. Van Gogh is, you know, a famous example, but there are many in medicine too, a lot. There was one that I studied where they died believing they had completely failed. And yet 50 years later, hygiene for surgery in the late 19th century, one of them who discovered the importance of washing your hands, died mocked by his other, by colleagues. So, I mean, that success and failure, if you actually read something, you begin to, at least I did, realize that it's pretty unreliable to the genuine value, maybe.
Yeah.
Anything else? Anybody?
What does it mean to be open?
It means to be receptive.
To look past yourself.
And definitely, you know, what closes us is ourselves. And so there, definitely look past yourself. Anybody else?
No question from Spencer
Anybody else have a nice?
or Greg?
Yes.
I just had a thought that I wanted to bounce off y'all, and that's, I feel like I'm better off, and not in the sense of like, well, I guess. Anyways, yeah, I just feel like I'm better off, or I feel like I'm more able to sort of just focus on practice if I'm not thinking in terms of, or if I abandon concepts of perfection or imperfection and success and failure. And I mean that in a pragmatic sense, and not just in the sense of, in the realm of emptiness, there are no distinctions like that. I think really, like, to some extent, even in the realm of distinctions, there are no distinctions like that if we don't reinforce them.
Yeah, I agree. Yes, certainly. We often have no idea how much we get lost in our concept of ourselves.
Mm.
And so giving up the self doesn't mean giving up, as it were, you. It means giving up your thoughts of you. Very, very different. But we confuse that thing because we think we are our thoughts, but we're not. We're not. Our thoughts are one part of our package. Very important part, but just one part. They're not us. Our thoughts are not us. Anybody else? Okay, well, it's now it's my
Does Joe have
oh
a,
Joe, you Joe?
So yeah, what can we do to not fool ourselves? Like if we think what we're doing is, say right or something, how can we not fool our own selves?
Well, by looking at yourself carefully.
being very honest?
Yeah, being honest with yourself. Yeah, not not
But
taking.
how?
Zazen. And look at yourself with dispassion. Finger.
A thumbs up. Yeah, not the finger.
That's what I meant.
You meant thumb.
I meant thumb. Yeah.
You meant thumb. Well, it's kind of a lifelong, Joe. It's, you work on it. You work on not fooling yourself. But there are some signs, you can put up signs about, about the things that people do, so, hating somebody, any of those negative emotions, those are not you. They're a part of you, but they are not you. So when you want something very much, sometimes it's correct to want it. But often if it's just out of just some desire that will pass after it's fulfilled, and it may not be important. There's no reason not to have what you want, but it often is not anywhere near as important as we think that it is. But you watch yourself, because that's what Jane's thing is about, not Jane's thing, but what she said today about, Zen practicing is one failure after another. Because you notice those failures. That's a failure. Those are problems. Those are bumps.
One mistake.
One mistake after another. Big difference. Yeah.
Well, failure is a
Anyway,
judgment.
one mistake after the other. Yeah. So
how do you bring the practice out to the world? Like real time?
Oh, because you become open and your whole attitude changes. And people are drawn to you. You aren't drawn to them, they're drawn. You're not looking forward to that being drawn to, but that's what they recognize you. You don't have to show them you. You don't have to be recognized. Just be you.
And also just carry the practice you do in the Zendo outside. You sit on the cushion and you look at your thoughts and you dispassionately decide, you can see where you're fooling yourself with your thoughts by getting carried away with them. So if you practice not getting carried away with them, eventually you do that outside as well. You don't believe your thoughts as much and you don't get carried away with them as much. So you just carry the same practices you do in the Zendo outside to whatever else you're doing. And you just practice honesty with yourself. You don't fool yourself at all.
Our most natural state, although often unrecognized, is taking care of others. That's why that's what, of course, is the Bodhisattva vow and Bodhisattva ideal, but it's the truth. We are truly happiest when we're taking care of others. And therefore, although it's not a matter of best interest, but it ends up being our best interest because that's our true nature.
And it's also taking care of us.
Yeah, and it's also take care of yourself. But you take care of others, and they take care of you. That's happiness. When you're taking care of yourself, and it's only for yourself, it probably is going to be suspect. when you should be taking your time taking care of others. By should mean, I shouldn't say should, you would naturally be taking care of others. When you do the smallest little thing for somebody, without thinking about it at all, not patting yourself on the back, definitely not that, but just, you know, you get a warm feeling. That's our human connection. I'm not going to tell the story again, Joe, but you know the story about the difference between heaven and hell. You've heard that, have you? Well, some other time anyway. Well,
Sounds familiar.
yeah. Anyway, it's a story, so it doesn't work as just a punchline. But I'm going to give it as a punchline. Heaven is people. I'll just give a summary rather than the story. Heaven is a place where everyone, where people have very long chopsticks and they can't feed themselves. And so they're always feeding others. And hell is a place where they're trying, like the devil, as it were, to feed themselves. One state is a state of happiness, and one is the state of the opposite. It's a little more dramatic when you tell the full story, but that's the punchline anyway. It's a Chinese story, I believe. Is that Indian?
We hold our chopsticks in the middle.
Oh, but I don't know. I meant that story about heaven and hell. Is that Chinese or I think Chinese? Yeah. Okay, let's have service. I guess we're done.